industrial hemp and medical marijuana. It grants immunity to those who can afford licenses. Remember, Ghana's Pharmacy Act and Narcotics Act have always permitted cultivation with the Ministry of Health, but this has little to do with the marijuana community. We have key stakeholders when we talk about the marijuana community. We have the everyday user, those who use as creams, those who use as pomade, those who use the seeds for protein, those who smoke a joint. They are all part of the everyday users. And then we have yeah, so she's describing an existing local economy where farmers depend on their produce and use it as wages to pay for labor. And that is, she intends to enter into the mixed cropping part of farming. And we know the monocropping, that the challenges with monocropping. Now, cocoa has issues and she seeks to diversify. This woman deserves equal protection, like the kind of protection we want to give to the licensed investor. So, Dr. Prempe Charles, Professor of African Studies, KNUST, said a good understanding of the beliefs of marijuana users could guide policymakers in devising an effective way of dealing with the social challenge. Now, reforms have centered on everyday user except the marijuana community. This is why the advocacy committee has taken this tangent. Now, in 2020, a plaintiff challenged Ghana's 2020 cannabis reform, claiming the international treaties mandated total prohibition. The Supreme Court, however, argued that the treaties do not ban all cultivation. It is within the state's purview to decide how to regulate. The drafters left room for signatories to pass laws that permitted legal use. So we realize that it is the state that is prohibiting cannabis and not the treaty. And advocates cannot leave regulation of marijuana to the states, as we have seen. Now, at the Second Opium Conference in 1925, the delegates admitted that prohibition could not be enforced in Africa because of the fact of the marijuana community. The French delegates said there are several tribes in Congo among whom the habit is very prevalent. The subcommittee F report also indicated that prohibition could be enforced in highly developed countries, but not in Central Africa or Central Asia. The question is, so why do we have prohibition still here? We use it holistically, but in 1925, the delegates imposed the big categories, medical and scientific. Today, advocates speak in terms of industrial, recreational, and sacramental. So here, go to the next slide. The next. Yeah, the next. Emphasizing that the marijuana community have always upheld this culture. Here is a brother in Congo doing his own thing without fear of police, without fear of the state giving him problems. Again, the next please. Again, here is our mother also, in the company of friends and family, doing her own thing without fear from police or the state. We noticed that the Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs in 1961 states that where marijuana grows may claim exemptions when signing the treaty if the herb is traditionally used by certain small, clearly determined groups with magical or religious rites. And the question is, here in Ghana, do we have marijuana growing? The answer is yes. And so the states were supposed to be exempted from this. Now, they made an assumption that certain small, clearly determined groups, but here in Ghana, we notice, and everywhere in the world, we notice that cannabis users span from all walks of life. We have doctors, we have teachers, we have masons, carpenters, all walks of life You have politicians, yes, Kayayo, Ashao, everybody uses herb, and everybody deserves equal protection. And so this definition for limited groups does not fit. In fact, we have the Rastafari community, we have our traditional healers who depend on the herbs to heal. Now, why we say that there is a need to center the marijuana community? According to the author of African Roots of Marijuana, Chris Duval, he said, cannabis smoking is ultimately an African innovation and contribution to world culture. So the Year of Return, the Dirty December, they all attract cannabis tourists. Africa is arguably the world's highest producer, according to UN report 2007, and is said to be home to the highest consumption rates. Nigeria tops the continent in the world with 19% plus user population. Ghana's high usage, Ghana use trend above 21%. It's significantly higher than the legal markets like Uruguay. In Uruguay, just 12% of the nation uses cannabis. Yes, it's legal, compared to Ghana, where we have more than 21%. And then Ghana is recognized as a liberal public perception country. So we have noticed that, yes, there is clearly an existing marijuana community here in Ghana, and marijuana laws must center on this marijuana community. Now we look at attempts to address the problems that came with prohibition. We have seen the legalization era. The 21st century has been declared a legalization era. You see Uruguay, South Africa, Canada, Malta, Luxembourg, Germany, Czech Republic, and other countries all legalizing. The 2016 United Nations General Assembly urged government to be more flexible. The United Nations General Assembly marked the end of the war on drugs and the beginning of the flexibilities era, as we have seen that the war on drugs was a war declared on people. So more than 40 countries have legalized medical marijuana. 40 US states, 4 territories in Washington have legalized marijuana. Go to next slide. Next. There's a map. Yes, the map. So here we see legalization in the global north. We realize that countries like US have legalized it for their citizens. In Africa, we see that the blue region marks where they have legalized. We realize that it's only in South Africa where the plant is legalized. Other parts of Africa continue to see persecution. This is what the next slide, we realize that the pre-prohibition Africa era, restrictions was put on the herb use. Now, Africa, when God gave us this, we have not had any prevention from accessing or using any herb. It was these conventions that imposed, these colonial laws that imposed the restrictions on cannabis. However, we noticed that in Ethiopia, something unique happened. Remember, Ethiopia was a nation that wasn't colonized. There, restrictions were imposed only on British residents and not on Ethiopians. And this is something worth stimulating when the state prioritizes their people. So we see legalization in global south. There has been a lot of promises and the model. There is a perception that there will be so much job creation and there will be tax revenue in $1 billion market. We have seen the models like medical, recreational marijuana use, medical and export use, and medical industrial only. For instance, in Ghana, that is where we are living. But we have observed that there are barriers. In certain places, of course, Professor Amotep is going to tell us more about the economics, but in some spaces, they don't see economic improvements. And there are bottlenecks like exorbitant license fees. We all heard that here in Ghana, most of our farmers are exempted. You need to acquire about 11 licenses. This position exempts most of our peasant or smallholder farmers. We also see a global export saturation and a lack of processing and quality control facilities. Professor Amotep will tell us more about how that will be addressed. We have observed that legalization has attracted foreign capital. It has attracted elite and foreign dominance, like our cocoa and gold market. We have seen open export markets. However, it has created a small number of jobs. And small farmers, small-scale farmers, they are excluded. However, the persecution continues, as we see in models in Jamaica. For instance, in Jamaica, where the Dangerous Drugs Act amendment was passed, when the states tried to address the problem of prohibition, certain proposals were made, including legalizing, some said decriminalizing. In Jamaica, the Dangerous Drugs Act amendment was passed in 2015. This law allowed Rastafari sacramental use in registered places of worship. It also permits 57 grams and 2 ounces and 5 plants per individual. The challenge here is that selling remains illegal. With Jamaica's advocate demanded sacramental and cultural rights as the core basis for legalization. So we notice that when advocates demand for something, they are likely to get what they want. And so if Jamaica demanded for sacramental, it comes with restriction. The more reason why the Advocacy Commission is leading the Abolish Cannabis campaign. Now we notice that they are still arrested for marijuana use. Go back. Now this is a picture of Anthony Marcus Goff, an attorney. He said, "We are fed up with the persecution. If the government will not intervene to protect our rights, maybe the court will do so." So Anthony Marcus Goff is a very busy man in Jamaica, because even though the plant is legalized, every day people get, the police continue to harass them. So the Rasta man heard from Ras IRV said, "Even though it is victorious, this is not what we want. What we want is for the police to stop harassing Rastafari for the help. This is why we are insisting on abolish cannabis prohibition." We also see legalization in South Africa, where the Cannabis for Private Purposes Act was passed in 2024. It permits 50 grams per adult, 4 plants per individual. Selling remains legal. The main advocates initially sought an exception for Rastafari religious rights, and that's the problem we do. That is why Ghana is not going to repeat that, to seek rights for Rastafari use and exempt all other uses. The state attorney in international courts told the advocates that the reason why prohibition remains in force is the result of the affiliant's misguided approach in the domestic courts. When the legalization bill was released, the South Africa Cannabis Regulatory Association questioned how an extra gram could justify jail time. So if you say I can only carry 50 grams, I go to the mama who spoke earlier, and then she dips her hand, she doesn't have a skill. She gives me, I reach the barrier, and the police says I have more than the required quantity. So how does an extra gram justify jail time? Jeremy Acton of the Dagger Party called it a declaration of war, a fascist totalitarian drug war upon the cannabis plant and culture, something the advocacy community is against. So why are we caught up in the language of legalization? Where did the term originate? When James R. White founded LEMA in 1964 to end prohibition, he also set up the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana to popularize legalized marijuana. So we use the term not because that is what provides our needs, it's because that is what everybody is saying. And there are two schools of thought: the legalization's interpretations of the treaty. Yes. The treaty is prohibitionist. Advocates, according to one school of thought, they say the treaty is prohibitionist. Advocates must use the remedial provisions, amendments, the reservation to justify realization or legalization. And there are those who say that no, the treaty is not prohibitionist. Rather, you can use 1961, the Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs, Article 29, which exempts use other than for medicinal and scientific purposes. So the bottom line here is that the global north is a colonial model and it fits that purpose. We only say legalize it because that is what was available. Now we want to look at a model, the Nyameneba model. And this is the model that suggests abolish cannabis prohibition. Nyameneba was arrested in 1963 for possessing, smoking, and cultivating Indian hemp. They rejected the official classification of the hemp. They said their plant was no Indian hemp, it's the herbs of life. Theirs are the herbs of life and not Indian hemp, whatever Indian hemp it might be. They wanted to cross-examine the state chemist to prove that the chemist's certificate could not relate to the herbs collected from them. And even when the court brought in a chemist, Nyameneba said no, they want to cross-examine the chemist to prove that their herb is the herb of life and not the Indian hemp. So what they did was to reject the categorization. And that is what the abolition seeks, that we reject every categorization that colonial administration imposed on us. At the Supreme Court, when they appealed their case, in fact, first they were sentenced to prison. They appealed their case, and in the acquittal, the judge, Justice Olenu, said, Nyameneba honestly believed all these years that theirs were the herbs of life. And this is the belief of the marijuana community, that we are not dealing with anything dangerous, we are dealing with herbs of life. So when we say abolition, what does it mean? These are the features. That there are misplaced fears that ending prohibition would increase crime and youth misuse. In countries that have legalized this, we don't see that happening. And so this is just fear. Also, abolition is how the marijuana community already lives. Of course, we all have seen that. So what we are seeking here is subtractive intervention, that we remove cannabis from the Narcotics Act entirely. What is required is the state should involve in what we call strategic policing. So the state will focus on policing at the airports, at the borders, and at the harbors. What we deserve is equal immunity, universal protection for producers, sellers, and users, like our mother who spoke earlier. So the way how, or what we are suggesting, recommending, is we use the cooperative approach, community-based regulations to order internal law and wider social interactions. So yes, with the cooperative we are proposing now, the cooperatives now determine the marijuana community's law. So in terms of community and structure, we form cooperatives at all levels, from local to global. This meeting is even an opportunity to start one. In terms of knowledge and research, there will be we'll constantly tap the expertise of farmers, the pushers, the users, the researchers to sustain efforts to discover more about the herb. And we leverage existing internal regulations and norms that have kept the culture socially conscious for generations. Here, into force. Quality is no ganja seller want to be in prison for cannabis. Laws that were set up to colonize us. I think we must undo these laws. So in closing, I'll end with a statement by Judge Eddie Ventos, who has been so much involved in cannabis legalization around the world. He said, fundamental rights and freedoms are not and can never be subject to parliamentary approval. So we cannot wait for Parliament to determine our rights as a community. We are taking that destiny into our hands and to insist on our rights. I thank you all for your audience.
Oh, you could do better. You could do better. Yeah. Thank you, Kofi Hassan. For that was very insightful. For the government, tell you when they recognize it, that they will also reap the benefits from it. And yeah, that's going forward. It's just an agricultural product. Yeah. So on this note, I think we'll welcome our keynote speaker, who is in the person of Professor for Imhotep. Yeah, with a round of applause. And yeah, Professor is a big cannabis scholar, and the scholar is cannabis scholarship. Actually, it began in 2020 with a founding editorial that firmly established cannabis as a legitimate subject of African political economy. In that same year, together with Dr. Kwashi, he produced the first policy analysis of Ghana's Narcotic Control Commission Bill and its implications for value chain development. In 2022, he turned his pen into philosophy, examining the profound relationship between plants and people, and the indigenous knowledge that has long guided those relationships. So in 2025, with Anochikwesi, he delivered a landmark abolishment framework and a work that continues to shape the conversation in policy corridors across the continent. And I think that is why we are here. And so let's pay attention and listen to some knowledge. Okay.
Ja. Ja. Please wake up, wake up, wake up. Good morning to you, brothers and sisters. It's a great pleasure to be with you on this special day. It's the 420 day around the world where various groups of people have attempted to go around the rules that have been created around just one plant. And it's also the day to mark your 5th Rastafari Cannabis advocacy work. And I congratulate the Rastafari community. Yeah, I mean, this has been a long drawn battle against not just indigenous knowledge, against not just the feminine principle, but against the very root of existence of our planet here, which is rooted in the plant kingdom. We exist as a symbiosis between what is in the plant kingdom and the other kingdoms. In fact, it's almost impossible to imagine a human being existing on this planet without the plants. So my work on this plant comes from that basis, the indigenous way in which this plant was treated. So, Mr. President and elders of the Rastafari community, I honor all of you. With your permission, I would like to proceed with the discussion that we have today. And I see this always as a family meeting where we all share knowledge. In essence, knowledge is not in one person's head. And like our ancestors said, it's like the baobab tree. It takes a whole lot of people to embrace, so no one person has it. My own work has been on looking at specific indigenous plants that when you activate their potential, it will add to the reset agenda that we talk about in the economy. In the last 3 years alone, and just in the last 6 months, cocoa prices have collapsed about 75%. We took a broad look at the cocoa economy, which our country here is one of the dominant producers globally. And we have also taken a broad look at plants like the shea nut. We had a conference at the University of Ghana a month ago on the shea nut value chain, the cashew value chain, and so many other, the baobab and tamarind, and so many other indigenous plants. And it so happened that this is also one of the most crucial plants in economic terms. We say that it has so many forward and backward linkages. In my editorial of the maiden issue of the Journal of Indigenous and Shamanic Studies, we talked about the multidimensionality of cannabis. Over here, I am not talking about smoking cannabis. I am not talking about just the one that they are legalizing. I'm talking about the whole spectrum of the plant. So this is beyond just the usage within the Rastafari community. Please check this. And generally how our people use it. I have been a student of the Nile Valley Sciences for some time now. And last year I went back to Egypt just to reconnect and also just to remind myself of some of the things that we took away from that land to this land. So I have a book looking at from the Nile to the Volta, which I show you how the two river systems, not just on the surface, but beneath, are connected and also above. And then if it was those people who built the civilizations there, that has already long been established by most of our ancestors already, that we are the same people. The usage of cannabis in embalming the bodies for burial and for preservation is one of the most critical plants that has been used over the years. And you will see in the pyramid text, in the medical papyri, the use and treatment of various kinds of diseases. So we are going to look at the science, the economics, and the law around what the debate around cannabis prohibition. And finally, we want to talk about abolition. So in this lecture, please make sure that the thing is stable so that I can change the slides. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. So this is the path I want to take you on. We look at the science of the plant, which has been well documented. In fact, it's one of the most studied plants globally among various indigenous plants. The evidence around the science, and then we also look at the colonial legacies surrounding the laws and the history of prohibition. Here, I don't intend to go far back, but I believe that the Rastafari group have already accumulated a lot of history around this. We can read the works. And then the economics of prohibition, which is where my work dwells. From the background of economics, I want to demonstrate to you what we have been teaching our students in the classroom about other plants, like tobacco, for instance, and other addictive substances, dangerous substances like alcohol, which are both legal compared to a plant like cannabis. And then also to look at what is the cost of actually trying to keep a legal system like what we have with respect to one plant in place. And then we also look at the benefits. Some of my colleagues have worked on the utilitarian cost-benefit analysis of cannabis. So a lot of that work we have collected in the journals, and I welcome all of you to take active interest and read and educate yourself on some of this. And then I'll look at some 5 pathways. Today we are more concerned about the number 5 because this is the 5th conference. And from this 5, it's a number of change. If we have reset the economy, we can also reset the cannabis laws to follow the new thinking around the new Africa. Yeah. And earlier on, I was talking to President, and I told him that it seems to me that everything is happening around this time for our good. For a long time, the Rastafari community has been talking about reparations and repatriation. And I remember almost 30 years ago, my great friend, Ras Olivini, in the Black Awareness Group at KNUST, we had these debates. And we have talked about all these things. Today, the time is up for us to do what our ancestors have asked us to come here and do. And so we have an African president who could voice this out on behalf of us, not just in Ghana, but across the globe. The whole of the Black world is waking up to the reality that the very places where the laws were made about keeping us in this state are the same places that we have to go back and change the laws. And so we have the reparation movement going on, and then the Rastafari movement talking about the cannabis abolition. So this conference has set a new tone for abolition. And that abolition is not a confrontation. It is about providing alternatives. Very often when you work with policymakers and you talk with them, you will sympathize with the positions that they find themselves. They are in a place where they are being made to implement policies that they themselves do not understand. So if we don't take a confrontational stance and we provide the science and the evidence, it could help clarify their own state of ignorance and help us in debate. So it's not a fight, it's about providing the evidence around the plant. And it's on our own brothers and sisters who are in uniform. It is our own brothers and sisters who are making the laws. It is us who are part of this generation of scholars, students, users, farmers, and various participants in the cannabis industry that the liberalized market will provide the opportunities. And if we want to raise the GDP faster and deeper and bring about changes in the economy, then something that we all come together, that's the last part, and say that if we all agree in this room that this is what we want to happen, then it has to be so. For we are the progenitors of this very dimension and this plane. Our ancestors told us, and they showed it, by the words of our mouth, we can pronounce things happen. And with the body of evidence, we can actually push them through the legal system that criminalized the free plant in the first place. So that is the journey. And this journey draws very much on my personal work that I've done so much at the University of the Witwatersrand. 3 years ago, we got a very big grant from the government department of agriculture and development. And at that time, they wanted to understand the various chemotypes of cannabis in the South African system. There are communities that live largely on the cannabis economy, just as we have communities that live on opium, coca, on tobacco, and so many other plants. If you go to Pondoland in the Eastern Cape of South Africa, that is all that they know. If you go to places like Binga, a whole province in Zimbabwe, it is cannabis. So if you abolish it and you prohibit it, what are you telling the people about economics? In the meantime, there are no jobs available. So we started looking at the indigenous strains of cannabis in South Africa. We did a very huge study. Some of my colleagues have all scattered now. Carl Rumbold is now in Vienna. He left for one of the big industrial microbiology labs. And the other colleague now at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, he's head in the School of Pharmacy. So we did all that into drug development, treatments of various kinds of conditions. And we have documented the literature in the first volume of the Journal of Indigenous and Shamanic Studies. All of that study is freely available. We touched on entrepreneurship, we touched on the various industries. The recent work is what published with Rastafari Anochi, and big up to Southern Fireside. It was an attempt to synthesize all the evidence and provide a menu that you can use in the debate of what happens. So please engage with the literature and educate yourself. We are now in the information world. Fortunately, because we are carrying too many smart devices, we haven't become smart ourselves. We need to be smarter than our devices. Not just clicking on the trending things, but sit down with the paper, read it, get the debates, the various strands of arguments. And when you are doing your advocacy work, you will be able to help your own brothers and sisters who are sitting in Parliament making the laws. that we said it didn't have any medical properties, but now we are wrong. And for some of the, very dangerous things that we said it had, finally we have come back and said, no, that is not the case. So even at the UN, where the laws were made, they have backed down. And within those conventions, you have the room to play. And that's where the Rastafari advocacy should help our parliamentarians. Because the global laws have all come down now. Now it's left with the internal laws. We never made any of those laws ourselves. It was being part of the international conventions. So within this endocannabinoid system, cannabis receptors or cannabinoid receptors help to maintain balance. Similar to when you are hungry, you get a kick. That sends certain messages to you to start to organize the red or the bamboo and okay. The same way, if you feel tired or sleepy, you get those. That is how the system is already working. In the plant world, there are those same compounds that help the human system work properly. Regulate the mood, anxiety and depression, various kinds of pain and disorders. Plant-based extracts are able to complement the humanoid system for it to function optimally. And this science really is very difficult to ignore because if you look at the phytochemistry of cannabis, it has so many compounds, the terpenes, flavonoids, all kinds that help either to lower the rate at which your nervous system is firing and wiring, and thereby lowering, the brainwave cycles. So with those who are familiar with meditation practice and just, being aware of your breath, you could get to those same states without the plant per se. But in the indigenous settings, this was a plant that was used to activate and titillate various neurotransmitters in the body. So depending on the strain, and where you grow it, where you take it, how you take it, and why you take it. So again, in the indigenous settings, these were important considerations before you approach. You could trigger certain receptors in your brain that causes the brainwave cycles to slow down. There you can analyze various thoughts. The entire fourth and fifth dimension becomes available because now you have an expanded view. And this is where some people who have studied it begin to see that you see patterns. It's just like in mathematics, a pattern recognition mechanism. It is not just cannabis that does it. Many plants have this cannabinoids. Our own cocoa, that's why they used to say that this is the food of the gods. Because when you take cocoa in its most natural, not the artificial cocoa that they have, but the original cocoa, without any milk, sugars, etc., in a ceremonial fashion, in large quantities, you trigger that same reaction of the endocannabinoid system. In the north of Ghana, where I come from, there are so many plants that we eat that has this property. It is true with many other indigenous plants, from coca to iboga to ayahuasca. So the indigenous way of dealing with this is to have a relationship with the plant as a teacher, as an explorer. And that is where today modern medicine is gradually coming to. And they will get there because it's a journey. So this prohibition, we were part of it. And this same prohibition, abolition, we have to be part of it. So that is the science of it. It's almost uncontested in any way. So many schools will begin to teach the endocannabinoid system now as a mainstream way of approaching medicine. There are already in South Africa some of my students who are medical practitioners whose practice is just related to using cannabis on various areas. So it will enter the classrooms. Like I said to you, based on the same route. No other way is possible. Now, if you look, and this is the area that I always emphasize, because many people who are cannabis users and promoters always go to the extent that, oh, it has no effect on such and such, but we want to face the science. There were good reasons why the prohibition started. The counterculture revolution of the 1960s produced a phenomenon that was almost out of control. If you have people popping LSD pills on the streets, you are sitting in the ghettos and popping, ganja. Opens the receptors. What you are bound to see is beyond what you have seen as a fixed 3D that has been given to you. And very often it's very, very difficult to control a crowd that has just woken up to the reality of the game. So it is important to understand why these things come. And so when you're making the case for abolition, it's also important to recognize the existing and inherent danger in taking it far as the counterculture revolution did. Abolition wasn't the answer, as we have found out 60 years later. But if we push also for, prohibition wasn't the answer. But if we push for a strong abolition without taking precautions, we may also enter into the same trap. So our work is just a synthesis. Let's look at the balance of the two. There are so many compounds and positive effects. Let's harness it. But let's also be cautious. And that's where government regulation comes in. So when you typically ingest cannabis, and there are so many ways. In the indigenous sense, this was food. Today, almost everybody who hears about it thinks about smoking, but that was very little. And even in smoking, the way they smoked it was different from how modern people want to smoke it. It is ceremonial, it is very, very sacramental, and the set and the setting is key to this. Where you take it, when you take it, and why you take it. All of these form. So the mental preparation. So in the indigenous settings, you will even be told that if you have an unstable mind, you will not come close to this plant. Because all it does is that it magnifies what is already inside. So if you already have a precondition of psychosis, an existing psychological imbalance, then it's going to trigger you to more imbalance. And the opposite may also be true. But then again, there are several strains that can be targeted to set specific receptors that will activate specific reactions if the people know. That is why continued prohibition will make it difficult for you to understand what you are already, prohibiting. And that is why those who are opening up are beginning to see different patterns and different, effects. Cannabis grown on the mountains is different than cannabis grown in the valleys. Cannabis grown under controlled conditions is different than cannabis grown under open conditions. So is the strains. Today we have all the hybrids. But later on, I'd like us to get into a discussion on how to look for the original Ghanaian strains that we begin to talk about. So mental health interactions, we have to be very cautious about that. Also, in moderation, well-intentioned and properly guided science, the plants themselves have no negative effect on people. But our society today does not take these things seriously. So we have to be very cautious. In my position as a teacher, we have to present the entire science for you to see. That when you trigger certain receptors, you are going to open certain cupboards, things you have packed there that you haven't looked at for aeons. And some of those Frankenstein monsters can truly be very, very, dangerous. But again, if you have the idea of creating something, bringing something new, and totally understanding what the universe works, this is simply an exploratory tool. Okay? So let's be aware of the negative effects of cannabis as we push the case for total abolition of prohibition. let's look at what the science also says about cannabis in relation to other kind of substances. And this is one of the most widely cited research by Anthony and his colleagues in 1994. And when the Constitution Court position was challenged in South Africa at the University of the Witwatersrand, there was an international conference where we brought all the global leaders who have done the work. David Nutt, who was head of the UK narcotics board, he has done so many pieces of research on this area. And this came up. When you look at among legal and illegal substances, the risk that cannabis will give you, the kinds of things that they talk about, psychosis and danger and etc. It is not formed by the science. Okay? So, tobacco is one of the most heavily promoted products. We got quite a lot of funding to do tobacco research. And it's well advertised, well promoted. In fact, in countries like Zimbabwe and Malawi, tobacco is one of their leading exports. We have laws around how to handle tobacco. If you are not up to a certain age, you are not allowed to purchase tobacco products. And now, with the laws around, you can't smoke tobacco in certain enclosed spaces. This is how responsible state regulation should be. We are making the same argument for cannabis as well. Because when you look at the costs and the benefits of regulating cannabis and leaving it to function like just a normal plant, like tobacco, the benefits far outweigh the costs. We have seen that, done the estimations for to see. And there has not been any confirmed case so far, according to our studies, of an overdose that took over into something that cannot be handled. We haven't yet studied this. We haven't yet seen the evidence here. And this is an area where more research is still needed. Those of you who are interested in exploring the dangers associated with different strains of cannabis and how they work, we need more research and more data for this one. Okay. If you look at the medical conditions, this has now been widely documented. In our own network, we have seen studies that looks at cannabis for conditions like migraine, for instance, post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety. The reason being that once those receptors, it's like a lock and key. So if you are locked into a low vibrating equilibrium, it opens up, more energy becomes available, and the receptors are able to fire and wire in your nerve. Your nervous system basically just take a new shape, lay new tracks that bypass those old, broken records that are constantly seen. So many conditions. In South Africa, again, it was a parliamentarian, the Honorable Ambrosini, and may he so rest in peace. He came out from the West forms of, chemotherapy treatment, very painful, effects of having to go through chemo for his cancer. And he championed the cause at the floor of Parliament. But we don't have to wait for people to get sick and get, through those conditions before we do what is finally necessary to let the plant just move according to what the global conditions and trends are also moving, but also inconsistent with our own indigenous understanding and meaning. So we have seen cases of multiple sclerosis. In fact, a lot of the neurodegenerative diseases that modern medicine says they have no cure, we have seen some of those getting better and better with some cannabis applications. So the research is really very, very key for us to understand more about what we need to know about this plant. So if you look at the global legal cannabis market, And part of my research looking at this shows that Ghana is still at the very, very, very early stage of this. And that's why the debate here is very key. If you look at South Africa, it's now capturing around almost $2 billion from the legal cannabis. But if you have done some economics here, you realize that the informal sector is always more. And let's empower the farmers, and let's have a responsible regulatory framework around it. So you see, Morocco is the next place where this is really their proximity, and Lesotho, which Ghana has already embraced, legalizing and turning it over into multinational control. When the past regime of the Lesotho government came in, they decided to rip it and just have a totally different conversation about how to properly harness this. So that is there. Zimbabwe, Uganda, and Malawi are some of the big places now on the continent where we see the cannabis revolution taking root. Ghana is the next frontier. That's what I believe this conference will help us to understand better. In the global sphere, the US still dominates this market. Canada, places like Canada, cannabis stocks are actually the most valuable now in some of the stock exchanges. So it creates just a wide variety of assets for those who are interested in investments, even stocks and other kinds of financial products. And these are valid, tradable, stocks that you can find. And then cannabis companies and etc. in various areas. So the African total is still very minuscule by global standards. We're just capturing about $7 billion for a continent that has the largest arable land available globally. I'll show you in a bit why Ghana is central to this debate, because we are located right at the heart of this revolution. So at the moment, due to the prohibition laws, Africa is capturing very little from the cannabis that it has the greatest potential. Now the cannabis paradox is very similar to all the other plants that we have. We are the second largest producer of cocoa. We are capturing less than 10% of the cocoa value chain in most cases. This is true for cashew and shea nuts. It is true for most of our raw commodities that we have here. So part of this conference should look beyond just cannabis into the other areas where we have actually just been deliberately or unintentionally just leaking our vital resources to the rest of the world. So let's look at the colonial history, just briefly on that, because there's a lot of history to this. Most people are claiming that there wasn't cannabis prior to the 1940s, but that is patently not so true, because from the Western Sahara all the way tracing back to the Nile Valley, and then through the Middle Passage, we find cannabis was always with our people everywhere they go. Of course, through trade, we came into contact with other strains, but the sativa strain, I will argue very strongly, it has always been part of our Southeast. But if you also study the works of Ivan van Sertima and John Clark and Joseph Ben Johanan, you see what we call India today is basically still us. Okay? continent, several areas that we have now forgotten that we are the same people before. So, prior to only find the only use of cannabis was for ceremonial and ritual purposes. This is our shamans, the sangomas, the earth priests, the medicine people, those who were carrying the great sciences of embalming the bodies, understanding the world of the seen and unseen. So this was a transcendent plant used for that purpose. So the medical rituals, we had them in our practices, they haven't changed at all. And then from a lot of influx of the soldiers who came back from the Second World War, who had gone in contact with the East. We still have the Burma camp here. Today, Burma is what is changed to Myanmar, but our soldiers fought in that battle from there. And when they came and set up the camp, they named it Burma camp. They brought some of these plants, cannabis from the East, and the culture started. But the culture was always here. From 1961 onwards, the UN became more active in consolidating all the various rules and regulations that existed in various countries into what they would call the Single Convention. And this was the UN Organization for Drugs. So the Single Convention set the rules for us. And it's interesting to note, in 1972, the Single Convention basically sets the parameters for what is permissible. It was also around the time of the counterculture. So, not just cannabis, but by arts. Because the moment you get out of this body, you see that things are not what they seem. In the normal sense, we sleep and then dream about that. But with your physical eyes, you can also get into those same conditions. So all the indigenous plants, which people use as just a normal ritual practice, as the rites of passage, they were used for initiation, then came under Schedule 1, Schedule 4 in some countries. In the UN, it was Schedule 4. In South Africa, Schedule 1. And what that says is that these substances are very dangerous and they have not got any known medical value. Today, it's very difficult to defend that kind of science, just as it was in the 1960s. And through the media, they will create all kinds of images about how you get crazy by just taking cannabis. And not just cannabis, but other plants. So in the case of ayahuasca, the Brazilian indigenous groups managed to get it as a right to use it for their rituals and their religious purposes. I think cannabis, for some reason, has gone on for quite a long time. In this country, the known laws started actually under the PNDC regime. The most draconian and restrictive laws on cannabis, among many cannabis laws, were enforced here in Ghana in the PNDC era. PNDC Law 236, that decreed a minimum of 10 years for possessing just cannabis. If you look at the contradiction, this is a plan that is about balance. When you set a law that doesn't give any room for escape, you set the people against the security agencies and each other. Any law that tries to regulate morals and what you should eat and what you shouldn't eat in your own space actually leads to moral decay. And that's what we've seen with a lot of the cannabis laws. In this country, for instance, just by possessing one or two rolls is enough for police people to pick you up lock you up for up to a minimum of 10 good years. Now, you also see the cognitive dissonance that sets, because there are many, many decent policemen who themselves are either cannabis farmers, cannabis users, they are shamans and shamans and religious people who use it as a sacramental plant. Now they are being asked by the state to put behind bars the people, his own brothers and sisters, who are using the same plant. So you see that this sets a very big contradiction in our psyche as a people, in the psyche of the security agencies, and in the society. It also stops the entire process of getting to understand what this is really about. What are the dangers that we are afraid of? And for what reasons? What can we do about it? So in my view, the only way to normally face these things is just to bring it out in the open, because the more you try to put it under, the more fire you create, because you want to know why is it that they don't want to be out in the open. So the key contradiction here is that even though Ghana has the most draconian cannabis use law. So this is similar to how we are doing with almost about everything. And so the religious system says to, criminalize behavior about how to relate. So all the things that we have categorized as sin are actually the most things that are happening within the society. So in Ghana, 21.5% annual prevalence rate is what is recorded. It's only in the US and in Nigeria that we have, this type of thing. So it actually beggars belief to see this. So across the board, the people making the laws and talking about it and criminalizing it in the media are the same people. And the people that are writing and presenting the science for its prohibition are the same people. So this is the kind of contradiction that we have to see. But the most interesting thing really is that it was a Ghanaian who sat in the 1972 review of the single convention. Our own father and great ancestor, Kwame Nkrumah. Yeah. Yes. But you see, at the time, those laws had been written. Most African countries entered independence with inherited monetary systems, inherited legal systems. Our lawyers and judges still put on those things, even though they have been taken off in England and other places. We entered with an educational system that had a colonial curriculum. We all learned that curriculum and we are regurgitating it back into the classrooms and into the open. So it was a Ghanaian, our own former president, our first president, our father of the nation, the great African god, Kwame Nkrumah sat on that, chaired that committee. But it must be another Ghanaian that led the UN that started talking about how this plant has to be set free. So Kofi Annan, our own Nana Busumulu, one of the greatest sons of the land, had also, initiated what we are now seeing today in the UN conventions. So there has been now reforms even at the United Nations level from 2019 to 2020, and now nations can actually work within their own legal systems, decide whether we want to keep this law, which wasn't originated of our own parliament, expanding it completely. That's what the fifth conference should really look at. It's moving beyond. At the global level, we agree that this was a menace in the 60s. Back and said, we're as dangerous as it is. And there's no better opportunity to do that in Ghana now than in any other time. Because we are beginning to wake up to a new conversation that a black man finally can run and can manage his own affairs, can make his own laws, where international laws, commit us to certain things. We must work them within what our own experience. Reforms, last parliament, at the last check, they have now put, adverts for people and companies and groups that want to apply for lines. But we are talking about something beyond laws. Just a technical classification that somebody wrote in a paper in the 1970s. We must now come to our own science and our own understanding and begin to help our parliamentarians and lawmakers and policymakers about the new parameters that we need to about the CEO levels. Yes, one day the experience of London, one continent and one region and one society is totally laws. Some of the conservative estimates, I saw this in the budget, 2024 budget. The Ghana Police Service actually spends around 7 to 10% of its budget on drug enforcement, not just cannabis. About 20 to 30% of this is related to cannabis. But there are about 14,000 people that are in jail on cannabis and cannabis-related offenses. Very often when you ask the lawyers, well, what crimes have they committed? It's very difficult to put a name on it other than its possession of an indigenous plant. You see, causing harm to some other people, is the smoking in any way or the usage in any way harmful, the external effects. We need to quantify that. But on the aggregate, we are spending around 186 to 264 million cedis a year by the police and narco to put the cannabis laws in motion. It's 186 to 264 million cedis a year. That is the cost of prohibition. These figures are coming from the budget, not from me. So you can check them out if you want to study the public sector effects of what we are doing with cannabis. A few years ago, when we were doing the research, we came into contact with some of the Narcotic Control Commission, and huge trucks of cannabis all seized. What are they going to do with them? Burn them up. Spend state money to arrest, drive the cars all the way, the trucks all the way, fuel them from wherever they were picked up, and then they are kept for some time, and then burn them out. And the people working at the commission themselves said, wow, what a waste. What a waste. We have research laboratories that could just extract these compounds. There are so many pathways in which we can redirect this. If we say that it's in the hands of criminals and dangerous users, how about the researchers, the drug manufacturing, the plastics, the biofuels, and the other industries that it owns? So this is something that is no longer affordable in our public finances. If we can save this amount of money, there are so many schools we can build. We have lots of roads. Driving from Kumasi to Accra is a nightmare. When you get off the main road anywhere in Accra, it's a nightmare. And then the police themselves. Anytime there's a traffic breakdown somewhere, you see how Ghanaians drive. This is one area where the police have done exceptionally well. Those on the street trying to control traffic. We need to release their energies from the prohibition so that they could be more available to control the traffic. There are other kinds of crime. You have seen the disclosures going on around the world. It's not just in Ghana. About what is being leaked out of this country by our own people across the board, across the political divide, across genders, across generations. We have become very wasteful in what we do here. And right now on the planet, the energies are so high that we can no longer continue this kind of wasteful behavior. It is important to recalibrate. And that is why the slogan that was chosen for the last election, not that I'm a politician, but to reset is really very key. But when you reset, what do? We have reset many, many, many times in the last 60 years since independence, only to go back to the same place. If you've seen how we have reset our economy, each time going back to borrow, when we have the resources right here in our midst. So this really cuts across everybody. We are all part of this journey, and we must all contribute. My work is to help to understand the amount of the leakage. In economics, we say this is a deadweight loss. There are people locked up, they are not doing anything, they are consuming anywhere around 14,000 cedis per annum just by being in the prisons for a crime like owning cannabis. And it also sets, the conditions for blackmail. Several instances where the police will meet somebody and then they themselves may be putting it because the law says it's illegal. We have recorded so many of these in the research, and it's high time we stop this utter demoralization of ourselves. And it is also the case because Rastafari community is associated with this one. Just seeing somebody with a dreadlock implies that he must be possessing cannabis. And possession of cannabis, according to this logic, means that it's a criminal. This is how we have made our law so dirty. To think of a majestic group of people like us to behave this way is really quite unpardonable. So if we are behaving this way, if we allow ourselves to behave this way, we also invite others to view us like that. So the change must come from you and me. We have to teach. We have to advocate. And we have to provide the means for that. So really, if you look at the size of the illicit market alone, it's staggering. And that is why where our children are consuming it without the safety precautions, because it's illegal, we don't even know what they are consuming. So a lot of the things that people peddle around as cannabis is really not cannabis. So many other plants that look like it. And here you have an overbloated underground market that is peddling so many things in the name of cannabis. And that's what sometimes the police fix. As I've shown you, if you do the science and you study the medicine very critically, you yourself will come to that tension conditions. This doesn't pose any significant danger. That's where we must get to. But look at the other side of this whole concept. What is the potential of just saying, no, we are no longer going on with demoralizing ourselves, criminalizing the plant, and letting it go? So if you see the revenues that are arising from the illicit market alone, around 13.98 billion, if you take just about 15% of tax on it, you are already getting over 2 billion Ghana cedis, 2 to 15 billion. This is money that has been unlocked for us to use to close the budget loopholes. It's also an area where farmers can go into, because we already have, as I've shown you, the best conditions anywhere on the planet to do this. So to force the market into indoor grow and limited to the regulations about THC being 0.3%, we're going to be shooting ourselves in the foot. It's a market where the indigenous knowledge already exists. It is a market where the best strains already exist. It is a market where the best conditions already exist. All that is needed is to take it to the next step. Recognize it, just as our president did at the United Nations, we have to make everybody understand. Even if they are not paying any reparations, I think Africa has enough already. Yeah. But let people understand that this represents one of the highest states of injustices on the planet. It is the same logic to prosecute on this land's possession could also be one of the most draconian ways in which we can handle the plant. So the era of abolition is actually upon us. It is up to us whether we will make that choice or not. Because we can free as much as 295 to 435 million Ghana cedis a year from the cannabis value chain alone. And these are just, the mini calculations that we can do. If you look at the job potential what our simulation shows and some of what the industry reports are showing, we could be creating as much as 80,000 jobs, direct jobs in the cannabis value chain. The indirect and the forward and backward linkages, we do not yet have the capacity. If you look at the economics of it alone, this is one of the most consequential plans when it comes to job creation. And it will unlock so many jobs and create alternative industries almost overnight. We have seen that surge in South Africa after the Constitutional Court ruling in 2018. And then subsequently, there's now the provision for recreational use, private use. And the laws are still evolving. So Ghana is still at the early stages. So I think part of my mission to you is that don't see this as a fight with the lawmakers, with the policymakers. It is a collaborative venture to try to understand what is here. This is what we are showing. Later on, we will show you, not today, but at another time, a book that actually puts all of this together and show you how to take it to the next level. So we can use that as a manual to make inputs into the policy debates so that we can help the government in the drive. So what are the cases for affirmative action? To actually go here, I want to show you, as I always want to do, a paradigm that we can use to analyze this. Last time I talked to you in the last conference about the eagle and the crow. And today I want to actually look at the eagle and the crab type of economy. Yeah, so the choice is really for us. I made this somewhere. We are an eagle economy. This is what our ancestors thought about when they put those two eagles to represent freedom and justice. The two eagles, when they take off, they take in flight. They have no restrictions. An eagle knows what to do. An eagle makes its own laws and obeys its own laws. In an eagle economy, it unlocks the potential of everything that is already in there, including the indigenous peoples. In an eagle economy, it studies the value chain where the maximum potential is, and it directs resources there. In an eagle economy, eagle lawyers will study laws and make new laws about what they plan to do. So we call something Ubuntu capitalism. What Malala actually called the African identity and personality that Nkrumah had also talked about. We are talking about cooperative economics, building communities around new ventures that creates more jobs and creates opportunities to make wealth. This is the most richest country also on the planet. So to talk about poverty here, it's like an oxymoron. It doesn't make sense. And it is all about whether we will behave as eagles or as a crab. The crab mentality is also real. All the prohibition laws have been about crab. It's also always about fear. What will freedom bring me? It happened in the slave farms. Even after they took the chains off, most people could not still fathom the idea that they could be free. So it was the same slave that would alert the master about what the others do. But Malcolm, two types of an eagle or a crab. The crab for fear. It's not that the market is deep for the crab to escape. Attempt to come out. And if we choose the crab route, we actually shoot ourselves again, because others, those who started putting the prohibition laws, have already taken the eagle path. How about eagles themselves? Those who are mimicking the eagle behavior are behaving like that. How about the eagles? This is an eagle country. Freedom and justice mean exactly that. Balance. The laws must be balanced. Just. That's what justice is. So in Kemet, when they put the feather and the hat, they must weigh in equal balance. Today, it's possible for almost all kinds of legal decisions and parameters to take place. Thank you. Okay. So the choice is really in our hands about where we want to go. My proposition is that we are already an eagle. We don't need to debate about being a crab. You have to really force yourself to become a crab. And the crab consciousness is very painful. It leads to incarceration. It drains revenue out of you. It turns the industry into the hands of external parties, and they exploit. Your lunch is being eaten whilst you're sitting. That's what we've done with almost about everything that nature has given to us, from gold to cocoa to cashew and now to cannabis. So that's really the choice. We go one further step and I'll look at the empirical arguments, just summarizing now. The evidence I've shown you so far has shown that prohibition itself has failed to deliver what it promised. So that argument can no longer be sustained. The usage rate since the 1960s have gone up. They haven't gone down. The plant itself, over 500 compounds, it's impossible to make laws and prohibit sections of it beyond what conglomerates can extract, IP and other patents from. So we want to go beyond that and have expanded consciousness. Also, the Schedule 1 rules and the Schedule 4 in the Single Convention are no longer defensible in the light of new science. And that is also something that gives us another tool in our toolbox in the debate about abolition. International law has already said that. 2019, 2020, the United Nations itself has taken down these, Single Convention Act, Article 2.9 preserves your domestic autonomy to decide what you want to do. So from this conference, the advocacy group, you begin to articulate this to our lawmakers and policymakers to understand the need for data. Then we have the violation of human rights. About the cannabis prohibition debate. The United Nations Organization on the Indigenous Peoples' Rights to use certain types of plants as a ceremonial and ritual, performance and rites of passage has now been enshrined. The UN has recognized this worldwide, and all indigenous people for whom this is a percent of GDP from just one plant alone. That in terms of public revenues, taxes, etc., it's tremendous for the states to give due attention to this. If we delay further, already the chessboard on the global economic scale has been put in place, and different industries are springing up, and different countries are taking positions. As I said to you, in Canada, cannabis stocks are traded in the stock exchange. In the US, along the entire East Coast to the West Coast, it's all the legal cannabis market up to the Midwest. The state of Colorado and California are noted as the world's largest places where now almost, if you want the best research, etc., into the different cannabis So the science has moved very, very far. And so has the law moved. The world too has moved. Will we move as an eagle or stay as a crab? These are choices, but I'm arguing we need to move also. So 5 pathways. The first one is really that the legislative framework for ending cannabis prohibition must reboot. And it is important that full decriminalization is implemented here in Ghana. This is crucial. In fact, we need to remove all criminal penalties for personal use, possession, and cultivation, replace enforcement apparatus with public health frameworks. Without this foundation, every other reform is really going to be very cosmetic. It will just touch, perhaps reset, but will not advance the cause of the plant, and it will not advance our cause as members of the community within which this plant has been given to us by nature. There has to be cultural recognition. For instance, codifying Rastafari sacramental use in law. We have already seen that in some of the Pacific Islands. This would be the norm in many countries coming forward. That is part of the positive outlook that we see for this plant. Increasingly, many countries will wake up to this, and the cry of Rastafari for this to be again recognized in the laws will be enshrined. Nobody knew what the reparations base when we were talking about it some years ago. But today, it's now an international fact that it must happen. It has been recognized and it will be recognized, and we have to go on. So continue the fight, the Rastafari Council Ghana. Continue with the advocacy and continue with the research that will inform people. And we want to ensure that there's also equity when the laws come in, so that both the people with the local knowledge and those coming in with the capital will have a good share of the proceeds from this. So we need to prioritize smallholder farmers and community co. And reparative justice is always in the debate and at the center of almost all of these cases where there is imbalance. There has to be. The planet itself has recalibrated, and we have no choice but to follow what our mother is already doing. Research and sovereignty is also important for us to invest in Ghanaian cannabis science. I have only heard that some of the best strains are here, but I haven't actually seen any of that here. So our universities, our research institutes, the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, the Council for the Center for Traditional and Herbal Medicine. We have also the schools of herbal medicine at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science. It's important that we begin to look at what has been written and said about these plants and what we can learn more about this in our own country. So funding research, and that's probably one of the things that the Rastafari Council can take up, to fund research that goes into looking at the details of what we don't yet understand, including the cost that has been used in the literature, including the negative effects. So let's try to understand both sides and maximize in the middle. Well, that's what balance is really all about. Africa is already moving. Now we have to gear up and make the move. 8+ African countries have already moved beyond prohibition in the last decade. So it's now an outlier to even begin to talk about prohibition. That's why the theme of this conference, abolition, is really more pertinent. Ghana stands at this threshold, together with countries like Lesotho, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Uganda, Malawi, Rwanda, and Morocco, to harness what we have termed the green gold. So you see, We have the green gold in abundance here. We have the actual gold also in abundance. So nothing is missing in our paradigm. So let's look at the industries. This I'm sure some of my other colleagues will touch on. But the moment we move towards the eagle economy, we unlock so many industries at once. From pharmaceuticals, now valued to bring in about $91 billion by 2030. Things like pain, medicine, anxiety, chronic diseases, autoimmune conditions, all of these are open. There is also a fast-growing wellness industry. If you go to the construction industry, hempcrete, some of our colleagues at the School of Architecture have created some of the beautiful, beautiful, hemp blocks. They are lighter. They give you some form of equilibrium when you are even in the building. There are so many hemp clothes. Instead of cutting trees down for books, we also have that for the book publishing industry. So it's really a minefield. And talk about African intellectual property. This is a plant that we can claim original ownership of its intellectual property. So research and development, carbon sequestration, etc. And then we have done a lot of studies on the remediation of the soils that have been destroyed by the galamsey and other environmental practices. So I'll end here briefly by saying that, and this is something that those of you who are musically inclined are invited to take it to the next step. But what I really want to say is that I'll lead this and then you respond. And then all together, we will say the healing is ours, the healing is free. And in the next slide, we will make the call, and then I'll bring my lecture to a close. So the call and the response. I believe you can all see what is projected. Yes, sir. So who planted the healing? The ancestors planted it. Who tended the healing?
The people tended it.
Who did? In our own way, we affirm the end of prohibitions written in a language that was never ours. The plant is free, the people are free. Ashe.
Wow, that was very, very insightful. Can we give another round of applause for that? That was a very great presentation. And by all standards, it takes us into the research, into science, into economics, into all aspects of the cannabis. And we're very grateful for that. So, without saying much, I think we have to move on to the next speaker. That is going to be Sedem Ofori, who is coming from the media consultant and a businessman. So, yes, with a round of applause, let's welcome.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Yes. So, that was a class act. I want us to, maybe you can move my slide to slide 10. Okay, so I can use, I'll try maybe within 10 minutes or less to, finish my presentation. It doesn't matter. I'm glad that my colleague, Imhotep, Professor Imhotep, actually took us back to the history of the law around prohibition. What is interesting is that prior to the 1930s, there was not a single legal restriction on cannabis in Ghana. In fact, the restrictions came through colonial rule. The British, when they were aligning their laws with that of the League of Nations in 1930, it was in their own interest that they made those laws and then handed those laws over to us. So these are inherited laws. The challenge with this law is that even if you go into Britain right now, they have removed that restriction and have allowed the prescription of medical cannabis. So while they gave you the law, they themselves have had a reason to revise it, and we are still holding on to the laws that they themselves have rejected. I mean, it begs the question as to whether we really have a legal system that has come of age. It's painful to say this, given that we have basically had our own judges, our own courts, and the opportunity to replace some of these laws to decolonize the legal system or the judiciary. But it will also appear that we find ourselves in a situation where we are holding on to laws that those who handed them over to us themselves don't see any use in keeping them. The central thesis of what I'm going to say is that we have an opportunity at this time to convince the nation that cannabis, the economic opportunities in cannabis, are perhaps the most revolutionary and the most cost-effective and practical way to take our people out of poverty. That is the fundamental argument or thesis in my presentation. I wouldn't go too much by the slides so that I can just put everything in summary and then get out of here in 10 minutes. There are quite a number of people to speak. But we are at a point in our nation where our president is really bent on getting the most out of our natural resources. He has declared to the world that by 2030, not a single natural resource will be leaving the shores of Ghana as a raw material. We would have to add value to everything that is produced here so that we get the most out of it. Where does this put us who are advocating for the abolition of restrictions on cannabis? This statement, as revolutionary as it is, also comes at a time when Ghana is faced with one of the most serious environmental problems, which is illegal mining, or what we call galamsey. Illegal mining is actually the search for economic opportunity by our youth and young people. It isn't being done with evil intention. Even though the equipment and much of the machinery that is used in extracting the gold comes from foreign interests, you would find that young people are responding to the call to get into the pits because they want jobs. So as we speak, if you look at the 2025 figures or data on where we stand in terms of our environmental degradation, Galamsey alone has destroyed over 9,000 hectares of land. 9,000 hectares. To put this in context for you to get the picture, 9,000 hectares is It has a unique feature that you can hardly find with other crops that deliver on economic value and then also in terms of environmental sustainability. It has a phytoremediation quality. Heavy metals. It absorbs mercury and other dangerous, if you will, carcinogenic agent deposits. Economic opportunities for the people who are into this business. It is not normal that a human and be digging out sludge in the midst of dangerous chemicals, men, women, children, in the pit. You think they don't know they're risking their lives? It is desperation that has pushed them there. Now, what we are saying is that if you look at the figures, and maybe you will go down further to a table where I draw a correlation between what can be made from cannabis in terms of LB or weightage as against cocoa. Yes. So I'm using very moderate, conservative figures. These are the figures that are pulled from September 2025. But if you look at the average global wholesale price for cocoa, the highest you get from it is $3.8 per LP. It has not fixed the soil. It takes between port disease and all the other issues that we're having. The problem with young people thinking that it's too difficult, it takes too long to come around in terms of turning it around into profit. You don't have that with cannabis. What it means is that if we can just rethink, at a point in our history that the Kwashi felt there was potential in this plant and smuggled it into Ghana. And we have benefited from it to some extent, but not even nearly as much as we should, because there is not a single natural resource that is produced in the raw state in Ghana that Ghana has ever set its own price for. Never in the history of this country. From gold to diamond, go and check. We don't set the price. There is a global pricing system where we don't participate in, that a group of people who are going to take it, refine it, and resell to us, tell us the price at which they are going to buy it. They tell us the price at which they are going to buy it. How many years after Tetekwashi, we have an opportunity now to apply some imagination, to rethink the fundamentals of our economy, and say this is a plant that has been uniquely gifted to us, uniquely suited to our environment that we can use to turn our economy around. Imagine how many people would want to leave the pits, the dangerous pits of illegal mining, and move into the sustainable agro-environment of growing cannabis in a sustained way. Just think about it. How many of our women, and it's really a disgrace that when you go into our markets, there are women of certain ethnic extractions who have been designated to be the burden bearers, the kayaye of the society. And we are looking for work for them, we can't find it. This is a sector that promises employment for those people. It is a sector that closes the economic gap between people who are marginalized, people living with disability, women who may not be educated, especially our rural folk. This is an economic opportunity that can actually give meaning to the 24-hour economy model that has been proposed by the President of the Republic of Ghana. This is where the solution will come from. Someone will ask, where would the money come from? If you just scroll down a bit, I just want to make a little, I'm trying to finish this quickly so that, yes, just go down a bit. Go there, then I can pass these points. Now, all these laws that you see on the screen are actually laws that have been there for many years. These are laws requiring any person who is going into mining in Ghana to set some money aside that will be used to replace or repair and restore the soil that is left damaged after mining. They didn't come yesterday. They've always been there. But if you follow closely on how we've implemented these laws, you realize that more than half of the mining companies in Ghana have not set, well, majority of them don't even put money together to provide this insurance, but the bulk of them don't even pay this money. They mine, they move on to the next field, and then that is it. What we are proposing as a council and as an advocacy committee is that you don't go and look for new money. Just enforce the laws that were put in place. The people who put that law in place and activity. Why don't we just go back to these laws that have been settled idle, have not been enforced, and take the money from there to get onto our 9,000 acres that have been destroyed and provide jobs for the youth? Is that too much to ask? Not a single city is being requested of government because the money is already inherent in the laws that have been put in place for the regeneration of soil that is destroyed. So in a nutshell, please just come down one step more for me. In summary, what I think, what I propose that we look out for and push for is to reclassify medical and industrial cannabis as an agricultural industrial commodity. This is very important, not as a drug. Because when something is illegal, you discourage investment. Why would you even want to deal in something that is illegal in the first place? Why would any investor want to put money into a sector where and is ready for the market, it can be impounded and taken away? Nobody, the risk level, it is illegal. So nobody is going to do this. Next, separate cultivation regulation and recreational use from narcotic enforcement. This is a herb that only became illegal in 1935 because some British exploiters who were here felt that in order for them to position themselves properly within the laws of the International Opioid Convention of 1925 and also the League of Nations, they needed to amend their laws. They did not consult us. I'm telling you, this very attack even went against local gin production, what you call application. It was outlawed, it was banned, but foreign schnapps were allowed into the country. And for a very long time, even for our traditional people, when they are asking for gin, that is just how the culture of assimilation can mess us up. It is the same mindset that has been bequeathed to this very important plant, cannabis, and unfortunately for us, in spite singing an anthem, we've not had the courage to confront something that is only just a couple of decades old, whether it has been free for more than a millennia within this very country. It is unfortunate. We are also asking that zone production on reclaimed Galamsey lands be done, and it must be a government policy under the 24-hour economy so that we can enforce the collection of the funds that are necessary to restore around the risks, because I think that it is overstated. Everything in the world can be abused. I will argue that even sugar is more dangerous to your health than cannabis. Okay. There are over-the-counter prescription drugs that are so dangerous that you can send your kids into pharmacies to go and buy. Alcohol is dangerous, even to the point of poisoning a fetus in the womb, and it is perfectly legal on our shelves. Why is it so? Why is the society not dead? Because inherent in that is regulation. There is two levels of regulation. There is the social regulation, which is the most important. Daddy and mama, uncles and brothers don't allow you to do certain things around the house. Then there is the legal regulation. Okay? they are perfectly normal. Aspirin is perfectly normal. You take 13 of that, that'll be your last headache. You're gone. But it is regulated, right? And to think that I have to be here, we have to organize a whole conference, expend time and energy to explain to the world that a plant is not illegal. Hence, why are we even doing this? A plant. You've not added anything to it. I'm like cigarettes. And my apologies to you if you enjoy you enjoy smoking some cigarettes, but there's a whole lot in there that you don't find in cannabis that causes serious health problems. But it is perfectly legal. So these are the requirements that what we are asking for. We require mining firms already legally obligated to reclaim lands to finance the cultivation of this sector. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. And I very much appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for this insightful presentation. And I think you just make that point very clear. They have to make cannabis an agricultural product, and that will be it. Yeah, so without saying much, I think we have to move on to the next speaker. That is Ras Aswad in Krabia, to give us some knowledge. And you know, this man is a very great legend, a serious activist, and just listen to some wisdom.
Yeah. Greetings in the name of the Imperial Majesty Emperor the Selassie I. Jah Rastafari. First, I'd like to give all honor and enough respect to the Rastafari Council Advocacy Committee for being able to stay the course for the past 5 years consistently, delivering the knowledge, delivering the necessary information. And today is a great testimony that the Advocacy Committee has grown and matured and is at this level to be able to interface with the government concerning policies. My first question from listening to everyone speaking here today, I'm impressed. I'm very impressed with the science, the political, economic aspect of it, and all the wide cross-section of views and perspective presented here today. The big question is, when the Narcotic Commission was having their closed door meetings before they launch out and bring out the price, were any of you here invited to that closed door meeting? No. And your stakeholders? According to them, they had stakeholders at that meeting to come out with this obnoxious, ridiculous, capitalist, imperialist price to impose on the population of Ghana. They didn't invite any of us to that meeting. And I am saying today that when I listen to my brother and the analogy of the eagle, if we are eagles, we have to behave like eagles. We have to act like eagles. It is important that the Rastafari Council Advocacy Committee take this advocacy to the next level. We have the knowledge, we have the information, we have the experience. Now we need to act on it, just like my brother said. We need to act on it by utilizing the power that the Constitution has given us from a justice standpoint. The narcotic control and those people's products that they labor and suffer to produce these cannabis that they burn and destroy and arrest families, destroy families, and all of that. So I have decided that the next level for us as advocates is to be more, I don't want to use the word confrontation because what it's going to look like we're talking about fighting, but we have no other choice. We have to confront the issues head on. Because you look at all the information here today, the science, the knowledge, the information on politics, the information on the economics, and the information on so many aspects, the science. But we must put that into practice. We must put that into practice by confronting the state. If the state is responsible for what NACO is doing, we must address it. So I'm going to just present a proposal that I am making, a recommendation for the council to request for an auditing, requesting for the Public Accounts Committee to conduct a special audit into the economic loss of the state of Ghana arising from knock-up, destruction, and seizure of cannabis. That's one. The Advocacy Committee needs to join the legal advocacy in court by the female farmer, read the barriers that has been set against small farmers and entrepreneurs for a class action lawsuit. That is the sister, I think she's in the north, Techman or somewhere, and she has sued the government for these barriers. We need to have other stakeholders joining that case in a class action lawsuit to empower it. Otherwise, it may be weakened. Number 3, seek all legal means to ensure rights given to religious, cultural, traditional entities to practice and manifest their religious customs. Just like we see that the UN has declared clearly that this is a right. So all these rights that we have must now be put into practice. Number 4, encourage the formation of a united front with all the stakeholders and farmers in practical ways to resist the injustice against the poor, farmers through demonstrations and public protests for public awareness. Our issues must become part of the public domain now, because a lot of people, they have look in the room, the poor and oppressed people, they are not here. So to strong and educate and relate to the masses concerning all the information that we have learned here today. Having said that, I would just like to give you an idea of how we can move forward. The Rastafari Council of Ghana Cannabis Advocacy Committee, which calls today for the abolition of cannabis prohibition. Public Accounts Committee of Parliament, Minister for Interior, and Director General of NACO. Petition for special audit pursuance for Article 1872 of the 1992 Constitution. Economic cost of narcotic drug destruction by NACO 2019-2025. Dear Auditor General, legal basis for this petition. On Article 1872 of the 1992 Constitution, the public accounts of Ghana and of all public offices shall be audited and reported on by the Auditor General. Article 18.187 further empowers you to disallow any items of expenditure which is contrary to the law and surcharges. Officer responsible for loss We petition your office to conduct a special audit into the economic loss to the state arising from NACO statutory destruction of seizure of cannabis under Section 108 of the Narcotic Control Commission Act 2020, Act 1019. The facts are requiring an audit. The 1st of February 9th, number 1, February 9, 2023, NACO publicly destroyed 50,000 kilograms of cannabis at Bundase. NACO valued the same at Ghana 50 million. Act 1019 mandates destruction, but does not mandate valuation or economic impact assessment prior to destruction. Number 2, 2nd of February 2019, 2026, 0 hemp license issues, despite Act 1019 legalizing 0.3% THC hemp. License fee set as Ghana 497,091.15. Foregone licensing revenue estimated Ghana 20 million to Ghana 50 million. 3. Global context, Rwanda earned 19 million in 2023 from medical cannabis export. Zimbabwe earned 35 million in 2022. Ghana earned 0 in those 5 or 6 years. 0. All we gain from that is destruction and burning of cannabis, of money. 0 from the same plant in the same period, while incurring cost to destroy it. And this is the cost that we are trying to ascertain now by calling for an auditing on NACO to see exactly where the losses are and how much losses are there. The criminal justice cost of 2020 to 2022, NACO reports 100 arrests, 32 convictions for cannabis, estimated prosecution, court, and incarceration costs to the state. Ghana 2 million plus fine recovered. Ghana 2,400,000 to 600,000 per case. These are expenses. Question for the special audit. We respectfully request your office to audit and report on number 1, total kilogram of cannabis destroyed by NACO from 2019 to 2025 and NACO internal valuation of the same. Number 2, total direct cost to the state of each destruction exercise. Fully secured destruction of exercise, fuel, security, personnel, transport under Section 108. Estimated market value, foregone. If destroyed cannabis had been transferred to licensed medical industrial extractors instead of burned. Using Rwanda, Lesotho export prices as a benchmark. Number 4, total potential tax revenue foregone from 2019 to 2025 if Ghana had licensed cultivation at that rate comparable to Zimbabwe, $50 license fee, assuming 1,000 smallholder license. Number 5, whether destruction of low THC cannabis without laboratory distinction between 0.3% hemp and 0.3 cannabis constitutes wasteful expenditure under the Public Financial Management Act 2016, Act 921. This is a big public interest. Ghana is under an IMF program while destroying tens of millions of CDs in potential state revenue. Article 36(1) mandates the state to manage the economy to secure maximum welfare. The public has a right to know the full cost of Section 108 as currently implemented. The relief that we are seeking. 1. Commission a special audit within 30 days and table the report before Parliament under Article 1875. Number 2, issue recommendations on whether Section 108 requires legislative amendment to permit transfer for medical industrial use as an alternative to destruction where THC testing is permitted. Number 3, surcharge any officers found to have caused loss through failure to distinguish hemp from narcotic cannabis prior to the destruction. And the whole irony of this is that hemp at 0.3% is just like contemporary. It's no different. So you're actually putting people in prison. Moringa, perfecting that, moringa, just like moringa. You're actually putting people behind bars, destroying families, destroying this crop for something that is not a narcotic plant. As a matter of fact, when we're ready to talk about reparations, this is where we're going to come in. They have to repair us, the Rastafari community 1, the poor and oppressed ghetto youth 2, and the farmers in the villages for all these damages for something that is not a narcotic plant. We stand ready to provide document evidence, including knockout press releases. They have presented themselves to the public and said, this is what we are doing. So all the evidence are there. Act 1019 and comparative revenue data from Rwanda, Lesotho, Zimbabwe, and Germany. Truth, discipline, responsibility. Ras Aswad and Krabia, co-founder of Empire Greek Ghana Limited, co-founder of the Rastafari Council. I stand in full solidarity with Rastafari Council of Ghana Advocacy in moving forward with this case. What we need to do now is to ensure that we have strong legal backing to enter the court to justify this. And it's not going to continue to violate. Then we move for the law of mandamus to deal with the government and knockout where that is concerned. So we're taking it step by step. Give thanks, Rastafari.
Wow, give thanks, give thanks. Yes, those are very serious questions. I think the government will have to answer these questions to us in due time. And moving forward, I think we're going to have a short presentation by the Ganja Growers Association of Jamaica. They're going to give us a short video presentation. So let's focus on the screen and watch that.
Brothers and sisters in Ghana, my name is Maurice Ellis. For connection, exchange, and collaboration in Jamaica and Ghana to share knowledge, strengthen advocacy, and support one another, building systems that are truly inclusive and just. This movement is global and this 420 we stand with you. Give thanks and blessings. Greetings, brothers and sisters in Ghana. My name is Maurice Ellis, and I'm the president of the Cannabis Conference Association of Jamaica. On behalf of the association, I bring greetings and solidarity as you convene your 5th National Ghana to share knowledge, strengthen advocacy, and brothers and sisters in Ghana. My name is Maurice Ellis, and and I'm the president of the Ganja Growers and Producers Association of Jamaica. On behalf of the association, I bring greetings and solidarity as you convene your 5th National Cannabis Conference. As you gather around this 420 observance, we recognize it not only as a moment of celebration, but as a powerful reminder of the ongoing journey towards justice, recognition, and inclusion for all those connected to this plant. We commend the Advocacy Commission for the Rastafari Council for advancing this important conversation, one that speaks not only to policy, but to people, culture, and rights. Here in Jamaica, GGPAJ represents a wide cross-section of the industry, traditional and small-scale farmers, licensed operators, and sacramental communities, all of whom have carried this plan and its legacy across generations. As the industry evolves, our mission remains clear: to ensure that those who laid the foundation are not left behind, but are meaningfully included in its future. We recognize that many of the challenges being addressed in Ghana, from decriminalization and fair access to economic opportunity and the protection of cultural and sacramental rights, are shared across our regions. This presents a powerful opportunity for connection, exchange, and collaboration between Jamaica and Ghana to share knowledge, strengthen advocacy, and support one another in building we stand in unity with you. Give thanks and blessings.
Yes. Okay, so that was a statement by the Ganja Growers and Producers Association of Jamaica. And from there, I think we move on to the Ghana Hemp Farmers Cooperative. Bobo Selassie, if you are here. Bobo Selassie. Call Bobo for me. Okay, so we're going to take a short statement by the Ghana Hemp Farmers Cooperatives by Bobo Selassie. And that is of the Pando branch. So let's welcome Bobo Selassie.
Selassie. Yeah. My name is Bobo Selassie Ni-Akwensi from the Mpese Royal family. Also on behalf of the Hemp Association of Ghana. HAG is a formation or a group of like-minded people who feel like they need to contribute to the legalization or regulation structures of the cannabis industry in Ghana. So when there was a year back when Ghana started to talk about that, about the legality or re-regulation of the laws in the parliament, I think Brother Aswad and then Nana Ajima, who were from the Rastafari Council Advocacy Committee, just like what we are doing today, out of one of the conferences, decided that we need to mobilize the basic farmers, because most of the time when we are raising these laws and we are doing this legislative instrument, we don't think about the main people who are affected day by day. Like when you take Kwame Nkrumah, for example, say moving from the grassroots. So we always forgetting the grassroots, so they take it as a need, as the Rastafari Council has been doing. So we organize the more based local farmers, not necessarily hemp farmers or anything, but anybody who have interest in the future of the regulation of cannabis law. So we were a group of people, actually Hemp Association of Ghana came by mobilizing the local communities, and then yes, and then also they have so we keep developing, and we have the Pando Hemp Growers Association as well. So, but all these are like embodiment of people who are trying to involve, take their impact, not only be at the side of the board trying to listen to the people, but they want to make impact. So we're able to even to organize ourselves with a whole number of cars and be able to reach to parliament, sit in the gallery. So even when the law was passed, the Speaker of Parliament recommended the two Rastafari elders who were there, like Najima and Aswad, that if any community can follow up an instrument, legislative instrument in a community or by the government from the beginning to the end, they will be like recommended for the community to make sure that they don't only impose the laws and the sanctions on them as people who don't commit no crime. And why we see it as very important to be part of this conference today is like the government have moved further, taking our challenges on our behalf by talking about taking slavery as a cruel or the grievous crime against humanity, which have opened broader discussion and broader like freedom to we as ordinary African people. Because I look back into these laws, even when the Professor Imhotep was representing or doing his presentation, you realize that the thing was already free on its own as seed plants by nature. And all of a sudden, we see this kind of the same colonialism or what brought us today, where we have to be persecuting people behind bars and jailing people, and it's been very easy with the Africans that any law they give to us to oppress or have like a struggling structure for our people is easily implemented. So these things were being challenged, especially by the religious system, which have been like burdening a lot of imposing laws on us, but they pretend to be our savior in the same way. So this law of the cannabis is becoming more struggling in our community, being enforced by the same very people that needs to make the law free. Because one time when you go closer to the politician, they will tell you, we are trying our best to make it regularized, but the religious and other community members who you share your daily activities with. And what is so painful to me is that it is very negative in Ghana to see number of people that have made impact or what they have made impact in their life, from education, strengthening of their, when they say livelihood, people survive. When they say livelihood, people survive through how somebody will go to get his 9-to-5 job and then go and feel like I look after his families or anything. That is how the help has been to people. But because it's not being free from the government, they find it very difficult to speak about it, even in public. It's very shameful to see that most of our traditional rulers have a lot of medicinal properties that they use the herb, but because it's being said by government is illegal, they cannot speak boldly for themselves, no matter how economically, spiritually, financially is backing them up. They always shy away from this. So we feel like organizing ourselves together as a backup to whatever government should be doing, or anybody in society or community who feel like they want to take the cannabis law into enforcement or regulation. We feel like it's good thing for we, the people of Volta region, to back them up as a way of getting our freedom from the government as well, because we feel like if we sit back, every law will be imposed on us without we being able to make any impact. And most negative part is the people who the law is affecting every day are the people who government don't mind when it comes to argument of these laws. So we feel like being members of the community from Volta region, we feel like it's very best for us to involve in the peak of the discussion and making our impact, making our communication contribution in a way that will not sit one day and see all the colonial laws that have been made against us will still continue as the way it is. For example, I was listening to the Minister of Interior, or whether I'm right, or one of the ministers. He said he went to all over the world. He went to Morocco, he went to Lesotho, he went to South Africa, and saw how helpful the cannabis was. He spoke about using it for shoes, for making a lot of product out of it. But he continued to say, but in Ghana, if you make mistake, you grow more than what is being accepted, you are against. So that means we are being satisfied with how much colonially we've been, like, I don't know how to put it right way, like, we set our own leaders to come and oppress us. I feel like when the slave was going down, they hand it over to the slave masters. Our slave masters' children in Ghana. So sometimes when I listen to our leaders, I feel ashamed as a Ghanaian to see how they can negatively or ignorantly, excuse my language, to impose some laws and say that no, if you make mistake, for a plant that has been free? And I wonder, I was always asking this question and I don't have answer. I'll still be asking it. Who allows cigarette to be legal in Ghana, which is not even produced by Ghana Tobacco Company or anything? It is produced by British and American Tobacco Company, but it's been allowed to be in our domain, destroying and other negative chemicals that are made by human, which is not from nature, are being allowed in one way or the other to be invading our community. Look at the youth today. The youth, if you go to today, when you say ghetto, ghetto is not about help. Ghetto is about and if you look this and blame everything on help, always dormant of our people. Like it's not time for us any longer to sit back as our president is pushing the reparative justice there as a mouthpiece for ourselves and by ourselves. When repatriation, I heard about another organization that is saying that they want to champion the repatriation cause by educating people about reparative justice and repatriation. Yet the Rastafari was not called as a stakeholders at all. And if you go to Bobo Kaba, say your repatriation is 30 miles of Black Star Line. Because everything that is our day-to-day music, West and everything. So until that day, if the Rastafari is not recognized and being the best contributor to the freedom of Africa, our freedom is still stick and is very far from our redemption. So therefore, we did not to sidelines, and all this is done by colonialism, because even the denial of education. As a Rastaman, when you're going to school, they ask you, do Rastaman also go to school? Because I can remember I was walking with my son to school. Somebody asked, do Rastaman also go to school? So it is not only by implementation, but it is a kind of a consciousness that has been brought into the people to grow with it continuously. And even when the more negative they go, the more satisfied they feel like they are doing the best. As said in the Bible, Christ said, we'll kill our own people feeling that we are doing the right. This is how the European or the so-called colonial master have set us. So I feel like we need to take off those unnecessary veils out of our imagination and live up as a community, as a people, and identify what is right and wrong for us when we compare ourselves to the Eagle family. Thank you so much. Last year, yeah. And my thanks to all the farmers who have supported, or all the people who have supported one way or the other to make this conference a possibility. Thank you, President Kex, Daddy Bosco, and all the elders that have been doing their best to keep this moving. Thank you so much. And all to our farmers who also come from Volta and all over the country. We give thanks as well for being part of the conference. Bless you.
Yes, that was very, very powerful. I think it sums everything up. From here, I think I will entreat each and every one of us to be reformers, to be researchers, and also to be the voice of reform, and also be ambassadors to this culture. Abolishment, as at now, is what we need. Total abolishment of the cannabis is what we need as at now. So on this note, I'd like to invite the co-chairman of the Council of the Advocacy Commission, that's President Kex, to give their closing remarks.
Last year,
Yeah.
Rastafari. We give thanks for the gathering. I just want to put a little bit of reminder to the authorities that in a free democratic society, which recognizes fundamentally but not exclusively the rule of law as the normative source of the source of normative right and rules, and in which government must promote autonomy. Government must promote autonomy as far as possible, and therefore make only sparing use of instruments of constraint. Public policy on psychoactive substances must be structured around guiding principles, respecting the life, health, security, and rights and freedom of individuals who and naturally, legitimately and naturally and development, and can recognize the presence, difference, and security of others. And we also want to advise the lawmakers not to let opinions resist facts, because most of these laws they pass it out of their opinions, not the facts. So they should rather follow the facts, like the things the earlier speakers came to, especially Professor Imhotep came to, present to us, so that we can be all equally respected and freely allowed to be moving around by our own conscience. I give thanks also for the coming of everybody to the program, especially the speakers and also the farmers and the facilitators of this program. I give thanks, and the media too. I give thanks for coming. We will entreat you to carry the message to reach far, so that our people can, the nation can understand what we are talking about. Because I think the government is so much afraid of the population, to let us be free, and use cannabis for our personal, benefits, So we give thanks so much. And then I'll say good afternoon to all of you. Give thanks.
Thank you very much.
You skip freedom fighters. You have a program. Read your program.
Freedom Fighter said everything has been said, and he feels like all the knowledge has been shared. Yeah, so from here, we'll all step outside and take a group picture to reckon the day. And yeah, before we go, I think we have to say a closing prayer. Since we started with an opening prayer, we have to say a closing prayer. And before the prayer, I'll entreat each and every one. Hello. I will entreat each and every one from here. We should ask the question. Let's just ask them this question. What is Ghana going to look like with a regulated cannabis industry? And this question must go to every one of them in the parliament. Yeah, so we demand answers from that. So let's go on with the closing prayer.
Before we go on with the closing prayer, I just want you to read the text for me. Okay. Up to it.
Yes. Jah Rastafari. Jah Rastafari. Jah Rastafari. One thing I was told, and now I know, that every law is illegal except the law of Jah. And I know the eagle used the law of Jah. So we give thanks, Rastafari. So we pray that the Most High Jah will hear our supplication, will hear our cry, will hear our plea, and grant us all that we need, so that we'll come together and as an association, organize people, so that we'll fight this madness, this slavery kind of mental slavery kind of thing. We pray that the Most High Jah will strengthen us when we speak, that the lawmakers will hear us and hear our words,
These are many blessings we ask through His name. Most out of His mouth, drove it as a cord with what? Sorry, I just want to take it from inside. 8.
8. So reading from the 18th Psalm, this is the 8th verse. And there went up smoke out of his nostrils, and fire out of his mouth devoured. Coals were kindled by it. He bowed the heavens also and came down, and darkness was under his feet. And he rode upon a cherub and did fly. Yeah, he did fly upon the wings of the wind. Jah. That's Psalm 18, verse 8. Okay, so I think on this note, we want to say a big thank you to each and every one here. And we also want to acknowledge our supporters, the main organizers, Rastafari Council of Ghana, supported by the Ganja Growers and Producers Association of Jamaica, the Black Agenda Report, and also the Economic Fighters League. So I want to say thank you to each and every one, also for making it to this place, being a part of this historic event. To our media personnel, we want to say a big thank you to each and every one of you, and we hope you propagate the message to the right places. Yes, so on this note, yes, I think it's time. Yes, and one of our key supporters, that is Ola Agro Ventures. Ola Agro Ventures, and he has this one. Yes, it's used for planting. I know the farmers can attest to that. So this is a very good contribute.
So this rooting powder contains seaweed extracts that helps to repair the soil and the plant. So for galamsey, wherever there is galamsey, it will repair the soil. It's meant to repair the soil. That's what seaweed does. So organic growth seaweed, natural, all natural, no synthetic hormones or fungicides. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, so I think this is the time we need to explore and harness the blessings of nature. This is our time. Let us explore and harness the blessings of nature. Give thanks. Jah Rastafari.